The transport layer. The last time we talked about the network layer, so today we'll continue with the transport layer. We'll have a short lecture on the transport layer and the protocols in the transport layer, and after that we will be working on a clicker quiz. So we'll be doing a clicker quiz competition in the next class, and I'll explain what that is after the lecture, but we will spend half of the class working on that today. So going back to our network model, the model that we were using had 5 layers. The first layer was the physical layer, which dealt with transmitting raw streams of bits or zeros and ones through the physical channel. The next layer we had in our network model was data link layer. With data link layer, what we did is create frames. In other words, we gave a beginning and an end to the stream of zeros and ones, and inside the beginning and the end was the actual data. And that the frames also contain the addresses of the network cards to which these frames are being sent to and from which they are originating. So it has sender and receiver's address, which was a MAC address. And now for these, machines had to be directly connected to each other in order for this to work. In the third layer was the network layer. And with the network layer, it allowed us to implement packets which can be sent from sender to receiver anywhere in the world. In other words, there could be many routers, machines, and switches and devices in between the sender and the receiver. And this layer allowed us to do addressing and to send and to route packets from sender to receiver in the best possible routes. So here routing happens and addressing. However, this layer did not provide a guarantee that the packets will make it there. So this layer, the network layer, only did a best effort delivery. So here we had the IP protocol, the internet protocol, which does not guarantee that the packets will make it there. So if any of the packets are lost or dropped or discarded, then that's it, they're gone. If we want to be sure that the packets will actually make it there, then we need the next layer, which is the transport layer. So with the transport layer, we'll implement what is called a connection between the sender and the receiver, and this connection would allow us to track the bits and pieces of each packet and acknowledge them, and if they were lost or came out of order or there was another issue with them, we can detect that and retransmit them and collect them all the pieces together until we have received the complete packet. When we do that, we attach a special header to the packet that allows us to implement these connections and track the packets, and when we attach that header, then it becomes a segment. And the last layer is the application layer. This is where the data came from to begin with. This is the application which needs to use the network, and it's sending this data. It's usually, it could be any application, but The easiest example that we can think of is an email. So if this is an email application and somebody types in an email message, then that is the message that is being sent. What we have on the picture is a question which is on one of my final exams. I don't remember if it's for this class or for the other class, but one of them has this question. And the question is saying, does the packet encapsulate the frame, or does the frame encapsulate the packet? So look in this picture and see what is the answer to this question. The frame encapsulates the packet. Is that what you said? Yes, because why? Because the frame is bigger than the packet, obviously, and the packet is inside the frame, right? Why is that? It's because where did this packet come from? Where did the data come from? The original data that we're trying to send on the network. It came from the application, right? Which is trying to send some data. Let's say this is the email application. This is where the data came from. This is the original message that somebody typed. Now, I gave example with email, but this could be anything. This could be a text message. This could be a database application. This could be a YouTube video or a GPS loading maps and geographic information and whatever in the world this application is trying to do, and it wants to send it over the network. That is the data or the message, and that's where it came from. And when it came from here, this was the process that generated it. It is sent down through the network architecture, which is divided into all of these layers. So from the top layer, it's sent to the layer below that picks it up, the message. It picks up the message and it attaches to it its header, which is the header for the transport layer. So this contains the information about the connections that we'll be implementing and port numbers and other information. And when that happens, now this message is now called a segment. And then it is passed down to the next layer underneath, which is the network layer, which takes that whole thing, the message with header 4 in the front. And that whole thing is now the data, according to this layer, and it attaches its header in the front, which is the IP header. This is where it puts in the IP address and the route, and that is used for routing. And so then it passes the message down. And all the other information that we've seen in the IP header passes the message down. Now, that whole thing becomes the message, becomes the data or the payload field. So message with header of the transport layer, with header of the network layer, the whole thing. The data link layer takes that whole thing, it treats it as the data, and attaches its header in the front. And now this thing is called or frame. So this header for the layer 2 contains information such as the MAC address and a checksum and all the things that we have seen, and that's where you see them starting to nest inside each other like that. So this came from the transport layer data unit, which is called a segment. It attached its header, passed it down. The network layer picked it up, it attached its header and created a packet, passed it down. The data link layer picked it up, attached its header, so that it became a frame, and passed it down to the physical layer, and now it's gone on the wire, on the network cable, or through the air, and then it travels. And when it gets on the receiving side, the whole process is repeated. Then it's gonna get to the physical layer of the receiving side. It will get passed up to data link. Data link will strip off the header and read the MAC address of whichever network interface card this is going to. And then it will pass it up to the network layer. Network layer will strip off this header, which contains the internet protocol information, and will route it to wherever it's going to through all the routers and the world. And then we'll pass it up to the transport layer. On the transport layer, we'll strip off its header and figure out if all the pieces came in and arrange them in the correct order. If everything's okay, it'll pass it up to the application layer, which is an email application, and finally this email is received, or whatever that application was doing. If it was a database, then the database query is received. If it's a GPS application, then a map will show up on the screen, or whatever the data this message contained. So going back to the transport